It's very clear that for anyone trying to adopt new habits, getting into the mindset of procedural memory is very useful for overcoming that barrier that we call limbic friction. How do you do that? Well, a simple visualization exercise, or it doesn't even have to be done eyes closed. Oftentimes we hear visualization exercise. You think about sitting in the lotus position, eyes closed, and trying really hard to visualize something. It doesn't need to be anything like that. It can simply be, if you are deciding to adopt a new habit, to just think about the very specific sequence of steps that's required to execute that habit. And I'll use a trivial example, but this could be applied to anything. Let's say I want to get into the habit of making myself or someone else in my household a cup of espresso every morning. I would actually think through each of those steps, walk into the kitchen, turn on the espresso machine, draw the espresso, walking through each of those steps from start to finish. And it turns out just that simple mental exercise done once can shift people toward a much higher likelihood of performing that habit regularly, not just the first time, but as they continue out into the days and weeks that follow. It's very useful to think not just about the procedural aspects of what you're going to do, but also think about the events that precede and follow that particular habit and the execution, or at least the effort to execute that habit. What you're doing is you're casting a kind of a spotlight around a bin of time or a set of events for which dopamine can be associated. What does this look like in the practical sense? Well, again, I'll just try and use very simple, concrete examples, but this could carry over to anything. Let's say I were somebody who has a hard time getting in that 30 to 60 minutes of zone 2 cardiovascular exercise mid-morning. This is actually an issue for me. I much prefer to do resistance exercise than cardiovascular exercise, although once I do it, I always feel much better. What I should do is positively anticipate the onset and the offset of that session, right? So thinking about leaning into the effort, going out and doing that zone 2 cardio session, and I should think about how I'm going to feel after. So not just thinking about how great I'm going to feel after, but also thinking about how hard it's going to be at the beginning, and then trying to reward myself subjectively for the entire experience. In other words, start rewarding task bracketing in addition to rewarding the execution of the habit itself. What you're trying to do is not restrict your thinking to just the habit that you're trying to form, but rather to grab a hold of the timing before and after that particular habit and start to positively associate reward mechanisms in your brain with that entire time bin. This is a very useful and very powerful tool in order to form habits.
You need motivation to go 3 days a week. You don't need motivation to go 7 days a week.
You don't need motivation to go 7 days a week.
No, because then it's not a choice. You need motivation when it's a choice. You don't need motivation when you go every day. It's easier to go 7 days a week than 3 days a week. Because if you do it 3 days a week, you need motivation. It's a choice. If you do it every day, it's just something you do every day. You have to find a place to do it, and you do it. It's not a choice. You can't mentally convince yourself, I'll do it tomorrow. You're just going to work out. You're going to the gym. That's part of living a healthy life. That's what you're going to do today.
So on Twitter, you said, let inertia work for you. The person who has to negotiate with themselves every day loses to the person who just designs their day for what they want it to be. This is in line with what you're talking about right now.
Yeah, if you're relying on willpower to do all the things that you want to do, you're never going to do them. You're just going to get stuck, and you're going to convince yourself with these great stories that you'll do it tomorrow. And, instead of going on the elliptical today, you're like, I don't feel like it. I'll do extra tomorrow. And these are the lies that we tell ourselves. But then, tomorrow comes and you still don't feel like it. And then all of a sudden it's, January 7th and you haven't been in the gym for 3 days and your New Year's resolutions are gone and you're not living the life that you want to be living. Think about that for a second. One of the reasons that works is you have external accountability. Somebody calling you to check in on you, right? Yeah. So I have a friend who works out. He does it 5 days a week, but he has a personal trainer every day. And the reason he does is if he didn't have a personal trainer, he wouldn't go.
Yeah, I feel like that's where I am. I do 3 days a week of heavy lifting, and I'll do other, I love going on walks or bike rides and stuff like that. I love playing tennis. I'll do those because those are enjoyable for me. Lifting heavy weights, I think, just sucks. And the only way I'll do it is if I have somebody standing over me telling me to do it. And so I've realized this about myself. I can't do it on my own.
One passion I think is exceptionally important for learning anything. In life, I certainly have spent days and weeks and months at a time, really obsessed with things. Now, to me, that's not necessarily useful on the long journey of learning a skill from the beginner to mastery. What has been useful to me, and if I have a philosophy on it, is probably centered around the rigor of discipline. So making sure that every single day you do a minimum amount of that particular thing, and you do it for weeks, months, years. And also, the way to remove motivation from the picture is to build a habit. When I'm first learning something, I try to set the goal of doing a minimum of 2 hours a day of that thing for a year to build the foundation. So that first year is really important. It's so easy to kind of skip out on a few days, and then days becomes weeks and weeks become months, and you lose completely that initial hook that like pulls you into the depth of the particular topic. So I really want to be a stickler of putting in, I would say 1 to 2 hours, but if I look at my life, successful things like music have been at least 2 hours a day for a year to build the foundation. Then looking out farther into, let's say, a 5-year range, you can lower that to about 1 hour a day. And that's to build what I would think of as expertise. I think you can get pretty good at something in 5 years if you just do it 1 hour a day. I don't know if this is true for everyone, but I think for me, not even an hour, just 10 minutes a day, it's been really surprising how good I can get at a bunch of little things from just doing every single day at not even 10 minutes, like 1 minute a day. Because it's rarely becomes a 1 minute thing. It usually blows up into a thing that takes an hour. But if you just set a hard lower limit and make sure you do it every single day, no matter what, no matter where you are, you end up forming this habit, and there's an accumulation effect of skill that's just fascinating. For me, there's always a kind of fascinating dance here between passion and discipline. I think passion goes up and down, and that's where discipline is essential to keep carrying you forward, to keep doing the thing every day. And I'm not a big believer of resting and then returning to the task. I'm a bigger believer in when you don't really want to do it, still grinding it out, and days later, your passion for the thing will return. People are different, but that's how I am. Because the greater danger for me is when you take a break, when you rest, is you're going to destroy the habit that you've built. And once you destroy the habit, it's too easy to never return to the pursuit of expertise that you were on for many years before.
Another tip that I would like to add, which has been very useful for me, is to focus on one habit at a time. And yes, this is not a very fancy tip, but it has simplified my habit formation process and not necessarily made it easier. Given that I combine this tip with the other tips that have been mentioned in this video, what I generally do is I follow a habit for 30 straight days without any excuses. So no matter how tired I am, no matter how late it is, I just do it. Even if I just have to do the bare minimum, as Lex Fridman mentioned, so 5 minutes, 10 minutes, I do it. And after the 30-day period, I do not have to struggle much to execute the habit. Even if there is some mental friction in certain habits, my mind has already gotten used to executing the habit in spite of the mental friction. And what I mean by mental friction is self-negotiation or mental lies that we often tell ourselves. And at the end of the 30th day, I also decide whether I want to keep following this habit. And what happens is when I try to inculcate another new habit for a 30-day period or longer, the earlier habit doesn't act as an obstacle or hindrance in the habit formation process of the new habit, which would not have been the case if I started to follow 5 habits all at once, which feels very exciting. I will have 5 habits by the end of this period. But I have never been successful by starting to follow 5 habits or more all at once. I have been most successful in making a habit stick when I've started with one habit.